In the world of Harry Potter, no figure casts a shadow as long or as dark as Lord Voldemort. Even though he officially makes his full debut in the fourth book, his existence is heavily felt throughout the entire series. He is the story's driving force, the origin of its greatest tragedies, and the reason behind the rise of its greatest hero. From the very first chapter to the final duel, his presence defines the entire series. He is a reflection of what happens when genius is twisted by pain, and when ambition knows no limits. Even though in the movies Voldemort was as important as in the books, they fail to show the full history of him and how he gained the influence and power that he had. This is the story of Voldemort and the origin of a legend who changed the wizarding world forever. In order to understand Tom Riddle, we must first talk about his birth and the family he comes from. Just like Harry Potter, Tom is a half-blood. His father was named Tom Riddle Sr., the son of wealthy muggles Thomas and Mary Riddle, who raised him to be snobbish and rude. Unlike his father, Tom's mother came from a pureblood family, and one of the Sacred 28, the House of Gaunt. House Gaunt was very wealthy and prominent once, having descended from many powerful witches and wizards, most notably Salazar Slytherin and Cadmus Pavarel. However, their liking for grandeur in tandem with little sensibility when it came to indulgences meant the family gold was squandered long before the last of the lineage was born. By the early 20th century, the Gaunts had been reduced to poverty, possessing only a few old heirlooms and living in a small run-down shack. Additionally, generations of inbreeding had made them violent and unstable. Marvolo Gaunt, grandfather of Tom, was often abusive toward his daughter Merope, whose emotional trauma made it difficult for her to use magic, making others believe she was a squib, a term used to describe a non-magical person who had at least one wizard parent. Orphan, Tom's uncle, being mentally deranged and having little regard for secrecy, frequently used magic in front of him and upon muggles, with his father approving of his actions. This inevitably brought him into conflict with the Ministry of Magic. When the head of the Magical Law Enforcement Squad, Bob Ogden, visited the Gaunts to address the issue, they resisted violently. Marvolo justified Morphin's actions and resisted Ogden's calm attempts at discussion. Just as Ogden rose to leave, Morphin ruthlessly revealed that Merope had a romantic admiration for the muggle whom he had attacked, Tom Riddle Sr. Marvolo became absolutely infuriated, seeing as they were purebloods and only associated with their kind, and attacked his filthy little blood traitor daughter, though Ogden stopped him from strangling her by using a revulsion jinx. Morphin then defended his father from further attacks by firing a storm of jinxes towards Ogden. Ogden apparated back to the ministry and returned with reinforcements within 15 minutes. Marvolo and Morphin both resisted, injuring several ministry officials, but they were eventually subdued and placed under arrest. Both men were brought before the Wizengamot. Marvolo was brought to trial, being charged with attacking the squad, resisting arrest, obstruction of justice, attempted assault on a witch, and contempt of the Wizengamot. Marvolo Gaunt was found guilty on all counts, and in mid to late 1925 was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment. His son also stood trial with Marvolo for being an accomplice during Marvolo's fight with the law enforcement squad, in addition to a trial for separate charges, and was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment. Merope, once Marvolo and Morphin were safe in prison, found herself alone and free for the first time in her life, and her magical abilities, which were suppressed by years of torment from her father and brother, flourished. She took the opportunity to escape from the desperate life she had led. Using either the Imperious Curse or a love potion, Merope seduced and married Tom Riddle Sr. Bob Ogden's visit was the last time Marvolo saw his daughter. When Marvolo became a free man again and returned to Little Hangleton, upon arriving to his shack, he expected to see Merope dutifully waiting for him and serving a hot meal in anticipation of his homecoming. Instead, he returned to an empty house with plenty of dust and a letter from Merope telling Marvolo she had gotten married and who his son-in-law was. Marvolo never mentioned Merope's name or acknowledged her existence from that day forward. Indeed, the shock of her desertion likely led to his early death. Furthermore, he had been greatly weakened by his time in prison, and he had possibly never learned to feed himself. The date of Marvolo's precise death is unknown, but he had already died by the time his son was released from Azkaban and returned to Little Hangleton. After a year of marriage, Merope Gaunt soon became pregnant and decided to release Riddle from his mental enslavement, having grown tired of living a lie. Dumbledore thought that she did this hoping that either her husband would have truly fallen in love with her by that point, or that he would at least stay for the sake of their unborn child. Unfortunately for her, Riddle did nothing of the kind. Riddle awoke into a nightmare and fled back to his family's home, believing himself to have been bewitched. Although according to Albus Dumbledore, he probably did not say that exactly, for fear of being thought insane. Instead, the villagers were told at most that he had been taken in, which they interpreted as Merope lied to Tom about being pregnant with his child. Being all alone, Merope staggered to the door of the orphanage, gave birth to Tom there, and died shortly after. Riddle grew up in the dingy orphanage, completely unaware of his wizarding heritage. Since the Muggle orphanage staff did not know anything about his mother, they didn't know anything about his magical background. Instead, they believed that Merope was a circus worker, as Mrs. Cole told Dumbledore as much shortly before his first meeting with Riddle. It is unknown whether or not the staff relayed this to Riddle before his first encounter with Dumbledore. Despite his ignorance of his mother's true background, Riddle did have some grasp of his abilities beyond that of normal magical children of his same age, and an unusually high degree of control over them. He could move objects with his mind and cause them to float wherever he wished, manipulate animals and creatures as he wished, speak Parseltongue, and use his power to inflict harm on other orphans. After getting into a fight with fellow orphan Billy Stubbs, he used his powers to hang the boy's rabbit from the rafters. On one occasion, he took two other orphans, Dennis Bishop and Amy Benson, into a cave where he performed an act, likely with his powers, so horrifying that the two orphans were traumatized into silence. Afterwards, he may have told them in some means not to tell anyone what happened in the cave. Riddle also stole from other orphans and hid their things in his cupboard like trophies. When Riddle was 11, Dumbledore, who at the time was the Transfiguration teacher at Hogwarts, talked to Mrs. Cole, who informed him of how unusual the boy was, sharing tales of his extraordinary influence over the other children. When Dumbledore was at last introduced to the boy, Riddle initially believed him to be a doctor or psychiatrist of some sort, coming to take him to an asylum because of what the staff had seen. He was convinced after Dumbledore demonstrated his power by using a flame-freezing charm on Riddle's cupboard and revealed that Hogwarts was a school for people with magic, whereupon Riddle realized that was what his abilities were. Tom also mentioned his proficiency for Parseltongue in the same meeting and asked if it was a common gift among wizards, to which Dumbledore replied, "Rare, but not unheard of." Dumbledore also admonished Riddle for stealing from others and made him return the items with his apologies. He also warned Riddle to stop his misbehavior, as Hogwarts had an honor code whereupon lying, cheating, and stealing were not tolerated. At a very early age, it was clear that Riddle displayed a desire to be different and set apart from others, as it was hinted when he mentioned his dislike of his own name because it was such a common name. Riddle was not surprised upon being informed by Dumbledore that he was a wizard. He was, in fact, eager to believe that he had special gifts that no normal person had. Riddle also showed an eminent fear of death, considering it was a human weakness. He claimed that his mother could not have been a witch because if she was magical, then she would have been able to avoid dying, and thought that his father was a wizard. He asked if his father was an alumnus of Hogwarts, to which Dumbledore said he did not know offhand. Riddle's abuse of his wizarding powers alarmed Albus. He resolved to keep a close eye on him, something he should have done in any case, seeing as he was alone and friendless. Dumbledore also warned Riddle that at Hogwarts he would be introduced to the laws that controlled the usage of magic in the wizarding world, and that lawbreakers were punished with severity not by Hogwarts, but by the Ministry of Magic. Riddle's demeanor changed after Dumbledore reprimanded him. He became more guarded and shielded his real actions to things, adopting a kinder persona. Dumbledore provided Riddle with enough information to find Diagon Alley and Platform 9 3/4. He also provided Riddle with a stipend from school funds so that he could purchase his books and equipment. Traveling on his own to Diagon Alley, Riddle bought some second-hand robes and spellbooks for himself along with his wand, which was 13.5 inches made of yew with a phoenix feather core from Ollivanders. Little did Riddle know that very wand would, in the future, share the same wand core as Harry Potter. Garrick Ollivander later said that the wand was very powerful. Voldemort was very pleased with it until the wand failed him during his confrontation with Harry Potter in the Little Hangleton graveyard. Riddle was educated at Hogwarts from 1938 to 1945 and was sorted into Slytherin House, a nod to his ancestor Salazar Slytherin. During summer breaks, he was forced to return to the Muggle orphanage, which he despised and dreaded more than any other place on Earth. Riddle described the way he was seen as poor but brilliant, parentless but so brave, a school prefect, a model student. Due to his exceptional acting abilities and handsome looks, he was able to convince virtually all of the Hogwarts staff and instructors that his kinder facade was his true personality. The sole exception to this was Dumbledore, who, though not necessarily suspicious of Riddle, never forgot about his misdeeds at the orphanage, nor his unsettling behavior during their first meeting. In turn, Riddle realized that he had been careless in showing Dumbledore his true character upon their first meeting, and never attempted to win him over as he had with the other instructors. In time, he came to fear and despise Dumbledore. Over time, Riddle gathered to himself a gang of Slytherin thugs, a motley composition of the weak seeking protection, the ambitious seeking some shared glory, and the thuggish gravitating toward a leader who could show them more refined forms of cruelty, most of which would become the first Death Eaters. Riddle claimed they were his friends and made it appear so public, but in truth, they amounted to little more than servants, and he cared almost nothing for them. He often manipulated them into committing petty crimes and other misdeeds, but none of these incidents were reliably traced back to the group. Upon arriving at Hogwarts, Riddle became obsessed with his heritage and began researching it with an insatiable hunger. He focused solely on the identity of his father, still thinking of him to be the magical parent, as he had held on to his beliefs that death was a Muggle consequence and a weakness. He searched for his father's name in the school trophy room, in the records of Hogwarts prefects, and in records of wizarding history, but found nothing to suggest his father had even attended Hogwarts. He was eventually forced to accept that his father was the Muggle parent, and that his mother was the magical one. It was around this time that Riddle gave himself the alias Lord Voldemort to spare himself the reminder of his filthy Muggle father, who he later learned had abandoned his wife after learning she was a witch, although in reality he left her after she stopped controlling him with a love potion. Using his middle name, Marvolo, which was taken from his maternal grandfather, Riddle discovered his mother's heritage and the Gaunt's bloodline connection with Salazar Slytherin. Once Riddle learned of his ancestry, it was not long before he discovered the existence of the Chamber of Secrets under Hogwarts during his 5th year and tamed the basilisk which dwelt within. As the heir of Slytherin through his mother's family, Tom was able to open the chamber that Slytherin had left behind in order to purge the school of all those who were unworthy to study magic, in Riddle's and Slytherin's eyes, Muggleborns. Around the 13th of June 1943, the basilisk petrified many at Hogwarts, with its final victim being a student named Myrtle Warren, who was killed in the girl's bathroom when she saw the basilisk's yellow eyes. In light of this incident, the Hogwarts Board of Governors decided that Hogwarts would be closed. During that year, Riddle made a special request that Headmaster Armando Dippet would allow him to stay at school over the summer break. However, Dippet informed him of the governor's decisions and refused his request. Realizing that the chamber would need to be closed and the culprit caught in order to keep the school open, and not have to return permanently to the orphanage, Riddle framed fellow student Rubeus Hagrid and his pet Acromantula Aragog. He convinced then Headmaster Dippet that Aragog was the monster that had terrorized the school. He also noted that Hagrid was keeping a dangerous pet, though this was shallow hypocrisy considering the monster he commanded. Hagrid was expelled, and Riddle received an engraved trophy for special services to the school. Dumbledore, who did not think that Hagrid was responsible for the killing, managed to arrange for him to be kept on as Hogwarts groundskeeper. Distrusting Riddle, Dumbledore kept an annoyingly close watch on him after that. Because of this, Riddle realized that he would not be able to risk opening the chamber while still a student. As such, he would use this murder to eventually preserve a part of his soul within his own school diary, the very first of his 7 Horcruxes, hoping it would one day lead someone to finish Salazar Slytherin's noble work. Around August of 1943, Riddle went to Little Hangleton to learn about his mother's family. While at the Gaunt shack, he met his uncle Morphin Gaunt, with whom he was far from impressed. Orphan mentioned offhandedly at one point during this meeting that he thought that Tom looked mighty like that Muggle, Merope's husband, Tom Riddle Sr. Riddle immediately demanded the identity of the Muggle in question, and Orphan told him the full story of his Muggle father, which infuriated Tom to the point of seeking revenge. Riddle stunned Orphan and took his wand, went over to the Riddle house and, using his uncle's wand, murdered his father, grandfather, and grandmother with the killing curse. Riddle covered up his crimes by altering Orphan's memory, causing him to believe that he was the killer. When the Ministry of Magic investigated the crime, Orphan, who had previously served 3 years in Azkaban for using magic in front of and against Muggles, freely admitted to the deed and was sentenced to life imprisonment in Azkaban. Tom took the Gaunt family's signet ring from Orphan and later on would preserve another part of his soul within it to make his second Horcrux, wearing it like a trophy at Hogwarts. In the 1943-44 school year, during his 6th year, Riddle questioned Professor Slughorn, who was taken in by Riddle's charisma and talent, about the possibility of creating more than one Horcrux, an event Slughorn felt deeply ashamed of in his later years. In his mid-teen years, Riddle already sought to make himself immortal. Being unable to find any recorded information on creating multiple Horcruxes, he wanted to split his soul into 7, as this was the most powerful magical number, and asked the experienced and knowledgeable Slughorn for an opinion before attempting this unknown feat. Slughorn answered all of Riddle's questions, thinking it was merely academic curiosity, but was deeply horrified at the thought of creating multiple Horcruxes. Riddle succeeded in doing so at some point during this year, creating his first Horcrux in the form of the aforementioned diary and his second in the form of the inherited ring. During Riddle's 7th year at Hogwarts, he was made head boy, earned outstanding marks in every examination he took, and received a medal for magical merit. Riddle was regarded as one of the most brilliant students ever to attend Hogwarts, a fact admitted by Dumbledore himself. After graduating, Riddle immediately approached Dippet and asked him for a chance to teach Defense Against the Dark Arts and to remain at Hogwarts for a reason that he did not confide with the headmaster. Hogwarts being his true home at heart, using the influential position as a teacher to recruit students into his future army and to continue learning the castle's magical secrets. Dippet refused this offer, deeming the boy too young, but invited Riddle to reapply in a few years if he was still interested in the post, something that Dumbledore heavily advised against. Shortly before leaving Hogwarts, however, Riddle charmed Helena Ravenclaw, the daughter of Rowena Ravenclaw and the ghost of Ravenclaw House, into telling him the location of her mother's diadem, which she revealed was in a hollow tree deep within a far-flung forest in Albania. He presumably traveled there at her instruction, murdering an Albanian peasant along the way before retrieving the diadem, in which he later preserved a third part of his soul to make his third Horcrux. Upon his return to Britain, Riddle was offered numerous positions in the Ministry of Magic, but ended up working at Borgin & Burke's, to the disappointment and surprise of many. Riddle set out to persuading witches and wizards to part with their valuable magical heirlooms, a job he was very good at. While working at Borgin & Burke's, Riddle befriended Hepzibah Smith, a wealthy and elderly descendant of Helga Hufflepuff. Between 1955 and 1960, Hepzibah showed Riddle her 2 most valuable treasures, his ancestor's locket and her ancestor's cup. Tom's eyes flashed red with cupidity upon seeing these objects, seeing the locket to be rightfully his as Slytherin's heir, and the cup as a reminder of Hogwarts, as well as a priceless artifact. Riddle murdered Hepzibah by using a little-known poison to steal these coveted objects and vanished without a trace. He again covered his tracks well by implanting another false memory into an innocent bystander, Hawkeye, Hepzibah's house elf. Hawkeye admitted to accidentally putting poison into Hepzibah's cocoa, which was believed as Hawkeye was elderly herself and thus believed to be senile. Meanwhile, Riddle immediately resigned his post at Borgin & Burke's and fled with the cup and locket, subsequently turning them into 2 more Horcruxes using the murders of Hepzibah and an unidentified Muggle tramp. Riddle disappeared for 10 long years. He slipped deeper into the dark arts, traveled extensively, consorted with disreputable people, began to become distorted in appearance and lose his handsomeness due to splitting his soul so many times, and began to use the alias Lord Voldemort openly. Dumbledore speculated that Riddle's twisted visage was also attributed to other forms of dark arts that he delved into as much as Horcruxes throughout those years, partaking in dangerous magical transformations in the process. 10 years after Hepzibah Smith's murder, Riddle appealed once more to the headmaster of Hogwarts, now Albus Dumbledore, for the position of Professor of Defense Against the Dark Arts. After a short, superficially amicable chat, Dumbledore directly confronted Riddle regarding why he had requested the position, as he knew full well that Riddle had no desire whatsoever to teach. Riddle, unable to make an open request of Dumbledore due to the malicious nature of his true intentions, simply left after a final, gentle rebuke from his former teacher. From that day on, Hogwarts was never able to keep a Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher for more than a year, which was attributed by Dumbledore to a curse by Riddle. The visit to Hogwarts was not fruitless, however, for Riddle used the opportunity to hide the diadem in the Room of Requirement where he believed it would never be found. Voldemort, as Riddle was now exclusively called, spent the next few years before the First Wizarding War gathering followers in witches and wizards who collectively called themselves Death Eaters. Some were supportive of his cause to dominate Muggles and Muggleborns, while others were greedy for domination, wealth, and fame. And yet others joined the Dark Lord out of fear. Voldemort considered them more like servants than friends or family. According to Sirius Black, Voldemort also used tricks, jinxes, and blackmail to get people to willingly join him. At some point around this time, Voldemort greatly enhanced his skills in legilimency, to the point that Snape claimed he was the most accomplished legilimens the world had ever seen. Voldemort could read, control, and unhinge the minds of others, and could almost always tell when he was being lied to. According to Severus Snape, Voldemort often enjoyed invading the minds of others, creating visions designed to torture them into madness. Only after extracting the last exquisite ounce of agony, only when he had them literally begging for death, would he finally kill them. In 1970, Voldemort started the First Wizarding War by taking advantage of one of the Wizarding world's greatest weaknesses, the beings and creatures that they had cast out. The Dark Lord recruited the giants, who had long ago been driven by wizard kind into the mountains, and werewolves, who were persecuted by most witches and wizards. Many feared that the goblins would also join him, as they were restricted from wand use, but it never happened. In fact, Voldemort murdered a family of goblins near Nottingham at some point during the war for an unknown reason, possibly anger at the neutrality of the goblins or no reason at all. Voldemort's army caused widespread destruction and mayhem during the war. Bartemius Crouch Sr., who was the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement at the time and was known for his fanatical hatred of the dark arts, issued an edict that gave Aurors authorization to use unforgivable curses on Death Eaters without warning, and suspects were sometimes handed over to the Dementors without a Wizengamot trial. Many innocent people were locked away. Due to the atrocities committed by the Death Eaters and Voldemort and his terrifying persona, people were afraid to even speak his name, and he was referred to as you-know-who or he who must not be named. Under the staunch protection of Dumbledore, the only person who Voldemort truly feared, Hogwarts remained a safe place of learning throughout the entire war. The Order of the Phoenix was created by Dumbledore at this time to fight against Voldemort. The war itself lasted for 11 long years, during which the Dark Lord and his followers were responsible for the mass execution of several prominent wizard families that had exhibited loyalty to the anti-Death Eater movement, including the Boneses, the Pruitts, and the McKinnons. Voldemort, who rarely fought those he did not consider equal to him in terms of skill, was also responsible for murdering Dorcas Meadows, a member of the Order of the Phoenix that he killed personally. In 1979, Voldemort decided to test the defenses around his Horcruxes. He placed Slytherin's locket in the Crystal Cave and asked Regulus Black, a loyal 18-year-old Death Eater, to lend him his house elf, Kreacher. Voldemort took the elf with him to the cave, forced him to drink the emerald potion, and left him to die on the Crystal Cave Island. Kreacher was able to escape using house elf magic and told Regulus of what had happened. Over the years, Voldemort created an army of Inferi from the people he had killed to further strengthen his defenses. Upon hearing Kreacher's story, Regulus, who had already been somewhat uncomfortable with the reality of being a Death Eater, decided to defect. From clues left behind by Voldemort, he deduced that his master had created a Horcrux in order to become immortal. He took a duplicate locket and placed a note inside for Voldemort to find, then ordered Kreacher to take him to where the real locket was hidden. Creature guided Regulus past the cave's defenses. At the island, with the basin of potion containing the locket, Regulus ordered Creature to take it once the potion was gone and replace it with the fake one, then escape without him and find a way to destroy the Horcrux. Regulus drank the potion himself, and when he tried to get water from the lake to quench his thirst, he was dragged to his death by the Inferi. Creature obeyed his master's orders and switched the lockets before escaping. However, despite his best efforts, he was unable to destroy the Horcrux. During this time, Voldemort gave his old diary to Lucius Malfoy, one of his most loyal Death Eaters, and ordered him to hide it. Malfoy kept it safe in his manor, but the Dark Lord never told him that the diary contained a fragment of his soul. Voldemort informed him only that the diary was cleverly charmed and smuggling it into Hogwarts will cause the reopening of the legendary Chamber of Secrets and send the basilisk living inside the chamber to finish Slytherin's idea of cleaning the school of all Muggle-borns, thus proving that Voldemort was Slytherin's true heir. Voldemort also left Hufflepuff's cup in the cave of Bellatrix Lestrange, another one of his loyal Death Eaters. Much like her brother-in-law Lucius, Bellatrix was ordered to hide it, so she stored it in her family vault at Gringotts Wizarding Bank, which was considered impossible to plunder. She treated the object with extreme priority, although Voldemort had not informed her that the cup was a Horcrux. The cup was protected by the bank's extensive security measures, but Lestrange casted some protective curses on it, like a spell which would cause any object to multiply exponentially if touched by anyone other than the vault's owners. Probably during this time, he returned Gaunt's ring to the Gaunt Shack. He placed the ring inside a golden box and hid it beneath the shack's rotting floorboard, setting up many protective enchantments to deter outsiders from entering the shack and finding the ring. He also placed a powerful curse on the ring as well, one that would quickly lead to the death of the ring's wearer if not stemmed. 10 years into the war, when Voldemort was at the height of his dominion, a prophecy was given by Sybil Trelawney to Albus Dumbledore which predicted the fall of the Dark Lord. This prophecy was overheard by Death Eater and informant Severus Snape. According to Dumbledore, Snape had only heard half of the prophecy and was then thrown out by the barman, Aberforth Dumbledore, Albus's brother. He relayed to Voldemort what he had heard, not realizing that he had missed an important part of the message. Trelawney's description of the night's events was a bit different, however, as she stated that after feeling ill, Aberforth burst into the room with Snape in tow, whom he had caught eavesdropping at the door. This is in contrast with Dumbledore's description of events. However, this may be due to the fact that Dumbledore had wished to conceal the identity of the spy from Harry and told him a simplified version of the events. In any case, Voldemort received only the first part of the prophecy. Feeling threatened, he sprang into action to prevent the fulfillment of the prophecy. There were, at the time, 2 babies to whom the prophecy could have referred: Harry Potter, the half-blood son of James and Lily Potter, and Neville Longbottom, the pure-blood son of Frank and Alice Longbottom. Both families had sought to thwart Voldemort 3 times, and both families were members of the Order of the Phoenix. Both children in question were born at the end of July. Voldemort chose to target Harry instead of Neville. Dumbledore suspected that this was because Harry shared a similar family heritage with Voldemort, both of them being half-bloods. Sometime after Harry's birth, Peter Pettigrew, a member of the Order of the Phoenix and the Potter's secret keeper, began working as a Death Eater for Voldemort. On October 31st, 1981, he told Voldemort of their location. The Dark Lord traveled to Godric's Hollow, and with the Potter's Fidelius charm broken, he simply walked into their home. Once inside, he proceeded to murder James and Lily, who did not have their wands. However, when he used the killing curse on Harry, it rebounded and seemingly obliterated his body. This happened because Lily lovingly sacrificed her life to protect her son, creating a powerful defense of ancient magic around Harry which protected him for many years. After 11 years of domination and warfare, Voldemort was defeated for the first time. It was at this point that Voldemort's next Horcrux was unknowingly created. Years of experimentation, murder, and deliberately ripping his soul apart into so many Horcruxes had rendered the remainder of his soul so unstable that, when his body was destroyed, a small shard of his soul broke apart from the rest and latched onto the only other living being that remained in the room: Harry Potter himself. The soul shard latched onto Harry's own soul, granting him some of the Dark Lord's own powers and providing him with a latent connection to Voldemort's own mind. Ironically, Harry became the Dark Lord's 6th Horcrux, the desired number Voldemort wanted in order to split his soul into 7 pieces. Whatever remained of Voldemort's mangled soul swiftly escaped from the ruins of the house that same night. After Voldemort's first fall from domination, the Death Eaters dispersed and attempted to return to normal life, believing him to be dead. Many claimed they had been under the Imperius Curse, while others stayed true to their master and continued his work, most notably the Lestrange family, who were eventually taken into custody, convicted at trial, and imprisoned in Azkaban. Most of them, however, ultimately managed to remain free and to reintegrate into society. Voldemort lost his physical form and magical powers, but he remained alive in ghostly form. The Horcruxes he had created kept his spirit bound to the physical world. He retreated to the forests of Albania, where he had previously found his fifth Horcrux, and waited for his faithful Death Eaters to find him, but many of them now believed him dead, and those still faithful to him were either dead or in Azkaban. His one remaining power was possession. He gained physical form by inhabiting animals, mainly snakes, though he disliked doing so because the bodies of such animals were ill-equipped to perform magic, and because his possession significantly reduced their lifespans. None of his hosts survived for too long, and he would return to his spirit form. Additionally, any help that he could have potentially rendered himself required the use of a wand, and animals, obviously, could not be used for this purpose. Voldemort did not dare enter communities to possess humans, as he knew that Aurors were still abroad, looking for any signs of him. In 1991, Voldemort formed a plan to regain his physical body. Hogwarts professor Quirinus Quirrell had made a voyage to Albania, where his foolish and gullible mind was vulnerable to Voldemort. He latched onto Quirrell's body and came back to England with him. Somehow, Voldemort learned of the Philosopher's Stone, and how it could restore him to his physical form. He ordered Quirrell to steal the stone from Vault 713 in Gringotts Wizarding Bank so he could make the Elixir of Life. Voldemort discovered that the stone had been removed earlier the same day, and through Quirrell's connections at Hogwarts, learned it was hidden at the school. The same year that Voldemort set to the task of stealing the stone, Harry Potter began his first year at Hogwarts. There were many barriers protecting the stone. Severus Snape, who had switched sides near the end of the war and become Professor of Potions, was suspicious of Quirrell and hounded him relentlessly. On October 31st, Quirrell released a troll in the Hogwarts dungeons as a distraction, and sneaked his way to the third-floor corridor where the stone was being hidden. Snape followed him and blocked him off, but he had been bitten on the leg by the three-headed dog Fluffy in the process. Voldemort was not to be stopped. Later in the year, during a Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Slytherin, Voldemort ordered Quirrell to kill Harry Potter. Quirrell jinxed Harry's broomstick to throw him off, but Snape tried to save Harry with a countercurse. Hermione Granger, observing the crowd through binoculars to figure out who was jinxing the broom, saw Snape discreetly uttering the countercurse incantation, but mistakenly assumed he was performing the actual curse. Running to Snape's stand and setting fire to his robes to distract him and make him stop, she accidentally knocked Quirrell over. This meant that Quirrell broke the necessary eye contact for performing his spell correctly. Throughout the year, hosting Voldemort's soul drastically weakened Quirrell's body. Voldemort ordered Quirrell to prey on unicorns in the Forbidden Forest and drink their blood, so he could gain strength from the unicorn's healing abilities and keep Quirrell alive. Quirrell met Harry, Draco Malfoy, and Fang there, and was about to attack Harry until the centaur Firenze rescued him. About a week before Harry's exams, Harry overheard a conversation between Voldemort and Quirrell, in which the Dark Lord ordered the defense teacher to try and get the stone again. Potter mistook the conversation for an argument between Snape and Quirrell, because after the match with Hufflepuff, he saw the potions master trying to intimidate Quirrell. Perfectly aware of Hagrid's love for magical creatures from their school days and knowing well that Fluffy belonged to the half-giant, Voldemort forced Quirrell to trick the Hogwarts groundskeeper into telling him how to get past the three-headed dog. One day, at the Hog's Head in Hogsmeade, a hooded Quirrell met Hagrid and enticed him into a card game with the wager of a dragon egg. Hagrid assumed that the mysterious man was a dragon dealer and fellow dangerous creature enthusiast. Under the influence of a fair amount of mead, Hagrid divulged to Quirrell that playing music for Fluffy would put him to sleep. On June 4th, 1992, Voldemort ordered Quirrell to send a fake letter to Albus Dumbledore, asking him to go to the Ministry of Magic. Voldemort moved forward with his goal, moving through the security barriers to the Mirror of Erised. Quirrell saw himself presenting the stone to his master, but could not figure out how to get it. It was only when Harry arrived, thinking he was protecting the stone from Snape, that Voldemort saw a way he could get it. Dumbledore would later say, only those who wanted to find the stone but not use it could get it from the mirror. Voldemort figured this out, and Quirrell attacked Harry. When he touched Harry, however, his hands blistered and burned. Harry then placed his hands on Quirrell's face, severely injuring him. However, before Quirrell could harm Harry, Dumbledore appeared and Voldemort's soul fled, killing Quirrell in the process. Voldemort returned to the Albanian forest, weaker than ever. He had to wait yet again for someone to help him. When Voldemort was still hiding in Albania after his unsuccessful attempt to steal the Philosopher's Stone, Lucius Malfoy was still in possession of his diary. In the summer of 1992, Arthur Weasley began conducting raids on several wizarding households to seize dark or illegally enchanted objects under his recently proposed Muggle Protection Act. Before Malfoy Manor could be raided, Lucius sold several of his more incriminating possessions at Borgin and Burke's, and set in motion the old task that Voldemort assigned him, which involved reopening the Chamber of Secrets. At Flourish and Blotts, Malfoy planted the diary on 11-year-old Ginny Weasley, who brought it to Hogwarts. By doing this, he hoped to kill two birds with one stone. He would rid himself of any connections to the dark arts and discredit Arthur Weasley. Ginny began writing in it and discovered that 16-year-old Tom Riddle was responding. She found comfort in the diary, confiding it with her worries, unaware she was being manipulated. Riddle would always have sympathy. The diary slowly drained the life and energy from Ginny, transferring it to itself. Under the diary's control, Ginny reopened the Chamber of Secrets and released the basilisk, which petrified several students. While possessed, she also killed Hagrid's roosters and wrote threatening messages on the school corridors in rooster blood. Knowing that the diary was doing something to her, Ginny became upset and confused and tried to flush it down the toilet in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Harry and Ginny's brother Ron accidentally stumbled upon it, and Harry began communicating with the diary. When Ginny saw that Harry had the diary, she stole it back, for she did not want Harry to discover all the things she had written in it, especially her feelings for him and what she had done while under its influence. When this piece of Voldemort's soul was ready to take his physical form from Ginny's life, the diary lured her into the chamber while ignoring her pleas and cries for mercy. Harry found Ginny in time, and for the second time, he saw Tom Riddle. In their confrontation, Voldemort said that his father abandoned his mother when he found out that she was a witch, when he really left after Merope stopped giving him love potions. Of course, this may have been how he saw the events, an attempt to twist them to justify his hatred of Muggles, or simply his best guess, as he might not have realized Merope used the potion. Based on the words he speaks to Harry later in the Little Hangleton graveyard, he indicates his father was anti-magic. He didn't like magic, my father, which could have been revealed during a possible conversation between father and son when the young Voldemort confronted his Muggle father and grandparents. This encounter and Horcrux are what revealed Voldemort's past as Tom Marvolo Riddle to Harry. At first, Harry thought he was an ally and asked him for help. Then, when revealing his true identity to Harry, Riddle implied that he wanted to kill Harry in revenge for destroying him over even continuing Salazar Slytherin's wish of purging the school of Muggleborns. Instinctively, Harry used the basilisk's fang to stab the diary, thinking it would destroy its dark power. Not only was the diary destroyed, but Harry also unknowingly destroyed one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. In the summer of 1994, when Voldemort had all but given up hope of obtaining any help from his former servants, Peter Pettigrew, also known as Wormtail, who had faked his own death years earlier and hid from the authorities in his animagus form of a rat, traveled to Albania. Tired of traveling and hungry, Wormtail decided to eat something in an inn near the forest in which Voldemort was hiding. He was found there by Bertha Jorkins, a Ministry of Magic worker who was on holiday in Albania. Although she recognized Peter, Pettigrew lured her into Voldemort's forest hideout and overpowered her before handing her over to the Dark Lord. Upon torturing her, Voldemort was surprised to find out that someone had put a powerful memory charm on her. After breaking the charm, Voldemort learned from her that the Triwizard Tournament would be held at Hogwarts this year, and that Alistair Moody, an ex-Auror, will teach defense against the dark arts. She also revealed to him that Bartemius Crouch Jr., one of his loyal Death Eaters, who had been imprisoned in Azkaban after his fall and was thought to be dead, was alive. Bartemius Crouch Sr. was concealing his son at his home after helping him escape prison. Jorkins had stumbled upon Crouch Jr. at his house, and Crouch Sr. placed a memory charm on her so that she would not report it. Unable to possess her body and mind, which were damaged by the spells he cast, Voldemort murdered her. Knowing also that Wormtail had been deemed dead by the wizarding community and would have attracted too much attention, Voldemort did not possess his body either. Together, they built a rudimentary body that Voldemort used for travel and performing magic. While in this form, Voldemort was forced to drink a rudimentary body potion made from unicorn blood and venom from Nagini, a snake he befriended to sustain his life. At some point after Jorkins' murder, he turned Nagini into his last Horcrux, believing his soul to be in 7 pieces. Knowing that Dumbledore was sure to have seen to it that the Philosopher's Stone was destroyed, Voldemort knew that he would be unable to use the Elixir of Life to create a new body for himself. Voldemort decided to attempt an old piece of ritualistic dark magic to create a potion that would restore him to a body. He made plans to travel to England in order to obtain 2 of the 3 key ingredients: a bone from his father and the blood of his most hated enemy, Harry Potter. The third ingredient, the flesh of a servant willingly given, he would obtain from Wormtail himself. Returning to the Riddle house in Little Hangleton, Voldemort set his sights on finally killing Harry Potter. He considered kidnapping Harry during the 472nd Quidditch World Cup, where protection from his relatives and Dumbledore would not be so effective, but he was not strong enough to do it with the whole horde of Ministry employees running about, and instead began to concoct a plan to have the boy delivered to him instead, which led to Bartemius Crouch's infiltration of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, under the guise of the far-famed Auror Alistair Moody. As they were discussing their plans, Voldemort and Wormtail were unaware that a Muggle caretaker of the Riddle house, Frank Bryce, who had been suspected by the villagers for the murder of the Riddle family for 50 years, had been standing behind the door eavesdropping on their plans. When Nagini arrived in the corridor and spotted him, she informed Voldemort in Parseltongue about his presence. Voldemort invited him into the room and, after a short conversation, killed him for overhearing their plan. During the Quidditch World Cup, Barty Crouch Jr. escaped from his father's enchantments and cast the Dark Mark, but was quickly recaptured again. Voldemort and Wormtail went to the Crouch estate, where Voldemort placed Crouch Sr. under the Imperius Curse and freed Crouch Jr. for good. Voldemort ordered Crouch Jr. and Pettigrew to capture Moody at his home. When they did, Crouch placed Moody under the Imperius Curse and created Polyjuice Potion, which he used to impersonate Moody for the entire school year. He influenced the tournament for months, ensuring that Harry Potter would be the one to get the Triwizard Cup first, which, unbeknownst to anyone, was a portkey. Meanwhile, Voldemort returned to the Crouch estate with Wormtail, where they ordered Crouch Sr. to continue about his business as usual. When Crouch Sr. started to show signs of resisting the Imperius Curse, Voldemort decided it was no longer safe to allow him to leave the house, and instead made him stay home under the presumption of being sick. In late May of 1995, Crouch Sr. continued to fight through Voldemort's control, and eventually escaped due to Wormtail's negligence. Voldemort quickly alerted Crouch Jr. to stop his father at all costs, as he surmised Crouch Sr. was intending to tell Dumbledore all about his past actions and Voldemort's plans. Upon Crouch Jr.'s success, Voldemort spared Pettigrew from being given to Nagini as meat, instead opting to punish him with the Cruciatus Curse. On June 24, 1995, Harry, in the spirit of sportsmanship, requested Cedric Diggory to tie with him for the win. When they both touched the portkey, they were transported to Little Hangleton Graveyard, where Wormtail and Voldemort were waiting. Under Voldemort's orders, Pettigrew murdered Cedric with the killing curse, and went on to have Harry tightly bound and gagged to the Riddle family tombstone. After Wormtail had placed Voldemort's rudimentary body in a cauldron containing the near-finished potion, he added the first 2 ingredients, one of which was his hand, causing it to burn from a poisonous-looking blue to burning red before he proceeded to obtain Harry's blood, and added it to the potion for his master's rebirth. Once the final ingredient was added, the potion turned blinding white, sending out bright sparks as it simmered before dying down, and a thick white steam issued from the cauldron. The ritual was now complete. Voldemort regained his physical body and emerged from the cauldron. Voldemort's appearance in the books is a little more different compared to the one that was shown in the movies. After he regained his body, his features became even more warped. In his final body, Voldemort was described as having pale white skin, a skeletally thin body, and dark scarlet eyes with cat-like slits for pupils. He He had a chalk-white face that resembled a skull, snake-like slits for nostrils, and large hands with unnaturally long fingers like spiders' legs. The transformation into this monstrous state is believed to have been the result of creating Horcruxes, becoming less human as he continued to divide his soul. Dumbledore also speculated that Voldemort may have gained his hideous appearance by also undergoing several dangerous magical transformations. He then called for his servant to show him his arm and used the now activated Dark Mark to summon his Death Eaters. Those who were perhaps most loyal to him, save for those who willingly went to Azkaban in his name, appeared. Voldemort welcomed them all before scorning them for believing him to be dead and informed them that he would expect better of them now that he had returned. The Dark Lord told the Death Eaters of the events that had led to his first downfall, his years in hiding before he tried to steal the Philosopher's Stone by possessing Quirrell, and his eventual defeat, before finally of how Pettigrew located him and they set out to orchestrate his resurrection. He rewarded Wormtail by constructing a silver hand. Voldemort then set his attention on Harry and began to mock and humiliate the boy before the Death Eaters. He then had Harry untied so he could force the young wizard into a duel where the Dark Lord had a greater advantage over him. When Harry refused to observe the formalities of a wizard's duel, Voldemort used the Imperius Curse to force him to bow to him. After inflicting the Cruciatus Curse on Harry several times and attempting the Imperius Curse again, which Harry was able to resist the second time, Voldemort was ready to end the one-sided duel and kill Harry once and for all. Yet as Voldemort cast Avada Kedavra, Harry simultaneously cast Expelliarmus, and their twin-core wands became locked in Priori Incantatem. People who had been killed by Voldemort's wand came out as spectral visions. First Diggory, then Bryce, then Jorkins, and followed by Lily and James Potter. They encouraged Harry while distracting Voldemort. Harry pulled away and had enough time to grab Cedric's body and the Triwizard Cup to return to Hogwarts. This infuriated Voldemort as he lost his chance at killing Harry right then and there, allowing Harry to alert Dumbledore to Voldemort's return, which created obvious obstacles in his plans to regain his power over the wizarding world. Back at Hogwarts, Crouch Jr. was discovered by Dumbledore and Harry, but was subjected to the Dementor's kiss before he could be put on trial before the Wizengamot. Thus, the only knowledge of Voldemort's return was Harry's word, which was vigorously disputed by the Ministry of Magic. Voldemort was able to secretly grow in power, concentrating on recruiting many wizards as well as the giants to his side in addition to stealing the full record of the prophecy regarding himself and Harry. In 1995, Dumbledore reconvened the Order of the Phoenix once more, using Sirius Black's family home at 12 Grimmauld Place as headquarters. Harry, Ron, and Hermione Granger set up a similar organization at Hogwarts called Dumbledore's Army, which was originally created to thwart the Ministry's meddling at the school under Dolores Umbridge. Thanks to the Ministry's denial of Voldemort's return and the Daily Prophet's smear campaign against Dumbledore and Harry, the general public was left unaware and ignorant of his presence, making it easy for his operations to run smoothly and without interference. Eventually, Voldemort traveled to Azkaban and freed several of his most loyal Death Eaters, such as Bellatrix Lestrange. Voldemort had little trouble with this, as many of the Dementors were happy to obey him. The Dark Wizards returned to his side thereafter. Voldemort's first attempt at securing the prophecy was to have Malfoy put Order member Sturgis Podmore under the Imperius Curse and send him to take the prophecy. However, Sturgis was unable to get into the Department of Mysteries. His next attempt was to use the Imperius Curse on an unspeakable named Broderick Bode. Bode was ordered to retrieve the prophecy but was seriously injured in the process and was put into a permanent ward at St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. From this, Voldemort learned that the only people who could retrieve a prophecy were the people who were included in the prophecy. Voldemort could not risk going into the Ministry himself, so he used a mental link through Harry's scar to cause him to go there instead. Once Harry saw a vision of Sirius trapped in the Department of Mysteries, members of Dumbledore's army, including Harry, Hermione, Ron, Ginny, Neville, and Luna Lovegood, went there to find him. Though Sirius was never actually there, Harry wound up retrieving the prophecy from its shelf. Death Eaters appeared at once, demanding that Harry hand the prophecy over. Dumbledore's army fought back, and during the ensuing battle, the prophecy was destroyed. Voldemort was forced to come to the Ministry, but upon learning of its destruction, he attempted to snuff out Harry's life. Voldemort's attempt was foiled by Dumbledore, and a fantastic duel ensued. Despite Voldemort's overwhelming magical abilities, much to his great frustration, Dumbledore quickly gained the upper hand against the Dark Lord, calmly avoiding and deflecting Voldemort's barrage of attacks, while also maintaining the offensive despite not even fighting to kill. Though he deflected all of Dumbledore's attempts to contain him, and even managed to nearly kill his former teacher, Voldemort was eventually trapped in an orb of water that he was forced to disapparate out of. Voldemort then attempted to possess Harry instead, hoping that Dumbledore would kill the boy in an attempt to destroy Voldemort himself, but Harry's heart, full of grief over the loss of his godfather Sirius, was able to force Voldemort out of his mind. With both the loss of the prophecy and his failure to kill Harry and defeat Dumbledore, Voldemort aborted his mission, dragging Bellatrix along as he fled, but not before Minister for Magic Cornelius Fudge and the Ministry's other officials arrived, witnessing for themselves that the Dark Lord had, in fact, returned. After a year of operating in secret, Lord Voldemort's cover was now blown, and the remaining Death Eaters incapacitated by the Order, including Lucius, were taken into custody and sent to Azkaban. With Voldemort no longer needing to keep his actions silent, the Second Wizarding War had begun. The Dementors left Azkaban to side with the Dark Lord, who could offer them more scope for their powers. As a result, there were many attacks by Voldemort's army. Mass Muggle killings were rampant. What was claimed to be a hurricane to the Muggle world was in fact a rampage by the Giants, whom Voldemort had drawn into allegiance. Voldemort himself dueled and killed Emilia Bones, the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, who was described as having put up a good fight against him and was one of the greatest witches of the age. Dementor attacks were daily, and the effect on the Muggles manifested in severe depression and grim weather. Voldemort attempted to blackmail Cornelius Fudge, and when he stood his ground, the Dark Lord initiated the destruction of the Brockdale Bridge, sending at least 12 cars into the water. In July of 1996, Voldemort required a spy within Hogwarts and inducted Lucius Malfoy's son Draco as a Death Eater. Forced to concede that he would not fight and win against his old teacher, the Dark Lord ordered Draco to kill Dumbledore, for he wished to punish Lucius for his failings by giving his son a task that he could not do. If Draco failed, he would meet terrible consequences. However, Draco was able to sneak a group of Death Eaters into Hogwarts through a pair of vanishing cabinets that connected Borgin and Burkes with the Room of Requirement. The Battle of the Astronomy Tower ensued. Voldemort's plans were carried out when Snape used the killing curse on Dumbledore, as Draco himself was unable to bring himself to commit murder, despite the threat he was under. Although the Death Eaters fled Hogwarts, the intrusion of the castle signified that there was no longer a single place safe from the Dark Lord. Overjoyed by Dumbledore's demise, Voldemort took over Malfoy Manor as his headquarters. During the summer of 1997, he captured Charity Burbage, the Hogwarts professor of Muggle studies, and killed her during a meeting with his Death Eaters before feeding her to Nagini. Voldemort also imprisoned and interrogated the kidnapped wand maker Garrick Ollivander about why his wand could not duel against Harry's. Ollivander revealed that their wands shared the same core and would not work properly against each other. This came as a great relief to Voldemort, who worried that Harry had escaped from him in the graveyard by superior skill. Ollivander told Voldemort that he merely needed another's wand, and so he took Lucius Malfoy's. This served as a way to punish and demean the Malfoy family. At this point, he was nearly ready to conquer the Ministry while insisting that Rufus Scrimgeour must be surrounded entirely before he made his next move. On July 27, 1997, when Harry left for Private Drive for the final time, Voldemort flew to the scene with his Death Eaters to find the Order of the Phoenix. In the ensuing battle, Voldemort murdered Alastor Moody. When he attempted to attack Harry, Harry's wand acted of its own accord, releasing golden fire at him and destroying Malfoy's wand. Before Voldemort could react, Harry reached the protection of the home of Ted and Andromeda Tonks, and Voldemort was forced to retreat. Voldemort returned to his headquarters at Malfoy Manor, accompanied by Peter Pettigrew, accused Ollivander of deliberately misleading him, and tortured him with the Cruciatus Curse. Ollivander told him truthfully that never in wand lore had he ever heard of such a thing happening between two wands. Voldemort ordered Ollivander to tell him everything he knew about the legendary wand known as the Elder Wand. Shortly after this, the Ministry of Magic was compromised and fell to the power of Voldemort when Minister Rufus Scrimgeour was tortured for information and murdered, with the official version being that he retired. News of this came to the Order of the Phoenix during the wedding of Bill Weasley and Fleur Delacour at the Burrow due to Kingsley Shacklebolt's Patronus. Voldemort established a totalitarian police state with Pius Thicknees under the Imperius Curse serving as a puppet minister for magic, and Death Eater Corbin Yaxley as the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. The Muggle-born Registration Commission was created to round up Muggle-borns and imprison them in Azkaban. Harry Potter was declared undesirable number 1 with a reward on his head, on the basis that he was wanted for questioning over the death of Dumbledore. Meanwhile, Severus Snape took over as headmaster of Hogwarts, while Death Eater siblings Amicus Carrow and Electo Carrow became teachers. Voldemort placed a taboo on his name which enabled his Death Eaters to instantly locate anyone who spoke it out loud in the open. Voldemort chose not to publicly declare himself Minister of Magic in order to maintain an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. With his servants taking care of business in Britain, Voldemort left Great Britain to seek out the acclaimed wand maker Mikhail Grigorovich and obtain the Elder Wand. Eventually, after murdering several people who got in his way, Voldemort found him but was informed that the wand had been stolen. Voldemort performed legilimency on Grigorovich and saw the memory of a young blonde boy who stole the wand. Voldemort demanded to know the identity of the thief, but when Grigorovich did not know it, Voldemort killed him. On Christmas Eve of 1997, Nagini summoned Voldemort to Godric's Hollow, where Harry and Hermione Granger were visiting the graves of Harry's parents and investigating the possibility that Bathilda Bagshot might have the Sword of Gryffindor. Harry and Hermione narrowly managed to escape just as he arrived. However, Voldemort found a picture of the aforementioned blonde boy at Bagshot's home. This boy turned out to be none other than the dark wizard Gellert Grindelwald, whom Dumbledore had defeated in 1945. In March of 1998, Voldemort traveled to Austria and broke into Normangard prison, where Grindelwald was being held, and demanded to know the location of the Elder Wand. Grindelwald baffled Voldemort by being completely unafraid of him and saying that he welcomed death. Voldemort then murdered him in a rage without gaining any information. At that moment, Bellatrix Lestrange summoned him by pressing the Dark Mark. Harry Potter had accidentally broken the taboo an hour prior, and he and his friends Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger were captured by a group of snatchers led by Fenrir Greyback and were brought to Malfoy Manor. He departed Austria to end Harry's life, but just before he could arrive, they managed to escape with the assistance of House Elf Dobby. The arriving Voldemort caused physical harm for Bellatrix and the Malfoys and forbade them to leave the manor as punishment. Shortly after this, Voldemort deduced that Dumbledore, who had defeated Grindelwald, had won the Elder Wand. Voldemort then went to Hogwarts, where he met with Snape and proceeded to break into Dumbledore's tomb and thus stole the Elder Wand. On May the 1st, 1998, Voldemort was informed by several goblins from Gringotts that Harry Potter and his friends Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger had robbed the Lestrange vault. This caused Voldemort to panic, and when he was informed that a small golden cup had been stolen, he flew into a rage. Voldemort massacred all those who told him the news, having realized at that moment that Harry was hunting his Horcruxes. However, he could not figure out how the boy had discovered his secret when he never told anyone. In truth, Dumbledore and Harry had discovered from studying Voldemort's past that he had created Horcruxes and also what they were and where they were hidden. Dumbledore first theorized about the Horcruxes and then passed the knowledge on to Harry. From there, Harry was able to complete the hunt. Voldemort listed all the locations of his Horcruxes in his mind, unaware that Harry was connected to his mind at the time. He unwittingly revealed that his last Horcrux was at Hogwarts, just as Harry previously suspected. This caused Harry, Ron, and Hermione to venture back to Hogwarts. Following these revelations, Voldemort went to check out the Gaunt Shack and the cave, only to discover, to his fury, that the Horcruxes stored there were missing and thus were likely destroyed. Voldemort then returned to Hogwarts, where the residents had already ousted the Death Eaters teaching there and had begun preparing a defense against him. Voldemort rounded up his entire army of Death Eaters, Snatchers, Werewolves, Giants, and Dementors, and commanded his army to fight the Order of the Phoenix members, professors, and students who were in the castle. The Battle of Hogwarts ensued. Voldemort himself was not present at the opening stage of the battle, as he was staying within the Shrieking Shack, feeling there was no need for him to fight at the time. While in the shack, he investigated why the Elder Wand did not work any differently from his old wand. He came to the conclusion that it needed to accept him as a master and ordered Nagini to kill Snape. He believed this would solve the problem by transferring mastery of the wand to himself, assuming that since Snape killed Dumbledore, then he was the current master of the wand. It is unknown why Voldemort didn't attempt to find Sybil Trelawney during this time, though it is possible that since Voldemort believed himself to be the master of the Elder Wand, he believed that any prophecy concerning him and Harry would be rendered irrelevant due to his enhanced power, of which he was ultimately wrong. Voldemort then called a 1-hour armistice, requesting Harry in exchange for peace and no further deaths. Unbeknownst to Voldemort, Harry carried within him the 7th Horcrux, the scar on his forehead which was formed when Voldemort failed to kill him as an infant. When Harry met Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest, Voldemort used the killing curse on him almost immediately, but only destroyed the Horcrux, rendering his scar normal. What was not revealed to Voldemort was that when he used Harry's blood 3 years prior in order to gain himself a new body, the blood passed Harry's mother's protection to Voldemort and anchored Harry to the living world through the Dark Lord. Both Harry and Voldemort temporarily fell unconscious, and Voldemort's maimed soul appeared in Limbo, where Harry spoke to Dumbledore. Unsure of what had just happened, Voldemort ordered Narcissa Malfoy to check Harry's body. Narcissa did so and pronounced Harry dead, eliciting celebration from the Death Eaters. Voldemort did not realize, however, that Narcissa had lied to him in order to enter the castle so as to find her son. As Voldemort and his army marched to Hogwarts, Voldemort claimed that Harry had been killed while trying to escape. Instead of surrendering, Neville charged at Voldemort. After Neville refused to join him, Voldemort placed a full-body bind curse and the sorting hat on him, and set the hat on fire to make an example of him, claiming that Slytherin would be the only Hogwarts house from then on. But at that moment, reinforcements from the Hogwarts defenders arrived. Neville was able to throw off the curse and pulled Gryffindor's sword from the hat, and used it to decapitate Nagini, destroying the last remaining Horcrux. Enraged, Voldemort attempted to kill Neville, but Harry, now beneath his invisibility cloak, interfered and cast a shield charm between them. During the second round of the Battle of Hogwarts, Voldemort tried to strike down everyone within his reach, and his weakened army forced its way into the castle. In the Great Hall, his army was gradually cut down as Voldemort fought Slughorn, Shacklebolt, and Minerva McGonagall at once, and later blasted them away. When Bellatrix Lestrange was killed by Molly Weasley, Voldemort turned his wand on her in rage. At that time, Harry cast a shield charm to protect her and revealed himself to be very much alive. The two wizards then faced each other in the Great Hall. Here, Harry mentioned that by willingly sacrificing himself to Voldemort, he had protected everyone he cared about in Hogwarts with the same magic his mother created when she died for him. Harry tried to explain to Voldemort that he had magic Voldemort did not have and a weapon more powerful than his, in addition to warning Voldemort of the fate that lay in store for him if he was unwilling to feel remorse for his actions. Goading him by using his birth name, Harry told him that Snape's loyalty was with Dumbledore all along, that Dumbledore's death was planned, and that Snape had not been the master of the Elder Wand. Draco had been. Originally shocked, Voldemort remained unworried because Harry did not have his original wand, and he told Harry he would kill him and then dispose of Draco to gain full mastery of the Elder Wand. But Harry revealed that he had already disarmed Draco, so the Elder Wand was now rightfully his. Refusing to believe this, Voldemort fired a killing curse at Harry, while Harry countered with his trademark spell of Expelliarmus. The Elder Wand refused to kill its true master, and Voldemort's spell rebounded off of Harry's, killing the Dark Lord once and for all. After his death, Voldemort's body was moved to a separate chamber away from the Great Hall. What happened to it afterwards remains unknown, but it can be assumed that it was disposed of. Meanwhile, his mutilated soul was trapped in limbo for eternity, as the soul is meant to stay whole and intact for a proper afterlife. Because of the destruction done to his soul, he was unable to move on or return to the land of the living as a ghost. After his confirmed death, the wizarding world at large seemed to be able to speak his name without any more fear. In the end, Lord Voldemort, who feared death above all, suffered a much more horrific fate.